Mary Jessica, a striking brunette, could hardly believe what she had just heard. Her mind reeled, struggling to process the words that had just left her stepmother's lips. Confusion and disbelief clouded her vision as a wave of anger surged through her chest. "If I get married, how am I supposed to work and save money for Dad's treatment?" she demanded, her voice tight with frustration. Emma, ever composed and elegant, let out a sigh of exasperation. Her painted lips curled into a knowing smirk as she leaned back in her chair, her polished nails tapping against the armrest. "That's exactly why I want you to marry the son of the Oliver family," she responded smoothly, as if the matter were already decided. Jessica's stomach twisted with disgust. "So you want to use me to pay off your debts?" she snapped, her brown eyes darkening with fury. They glistened, not with tears, but with a rage so intense it burned within her. How could Emma say such a thing so casually? Did she truly see her as nothing more than a pawn to be traded? Was it because she wasn't her real daughter? Emma scoffed, brushing away the accusation with a flick of her wrist. "Oh, don't be so dramatic. I just want you to have a comfortable life, one without financial struggles. Marrying a wealthy man means you won't have to worry about money ever again. Tell me, am I wrong?" Her voice carried a forced innocence, but the gleam in her eyes betrayed her true intentions. Jessica let out a sharp, bitter laugh. "Who do you think you're fooling, Emma? I'm not some naive little girl you can manipulate. I will never agree to this," she spat, her tone laced with defiance. She knew exactly what was happening. Emma, her selfish and money-hungry stepmother, wanted to use her as a bargaining chip to settle her own financial mess. The Oliver family was wealthy beyond measure, and their son, Michael Oliver, was the subject of endless rumors, most notably the speculation that he was gay. Jessica wasn't blind. This arranged marriage was nothing more than a cover-up, a calculated move to silence the gossip surrounding Michael while simultaneously erasing Emma's debts. And the worst part? Jessica had absolutely nothing to do with any of it. If anyone deserved to be married off, it was Emma herself. Let her be the one to wed Michael Oliver if she was so desperate for a solution. Her blood boiled at the sheer audacity of it all. Emma smirked, crossing her legs as she regarded Jessica with an air of amusement. "Oh, don't look at me like that. You don't like it, do you?" she mused, tilting her head mockingly. Jessica clenched her fists so tightly that her nails dug into her palms. Her entire body trembled with restraint. Emma's voice dropped into a dangerously soft whisper. "If you refuse, then I'll leave. And if I leave, well, that poor crippled father of yours will be all alone, won't he?" Jessica's head snapped up. "Emma!" she roared, the sheer intensity of her fury sending a tremor through her frame. Her breathing became ragged, her lips pressed together so tightly that they turned white. Emma's smile didn't falter. If anything, she seemed pleased. "Oh? Raising your voice at me now?" She arched a perfectly shaped brow. "Just because I'm your stepmother doesn't mean you can disrespect me, Jessica," she added, her voice sharpening. Jessica scoffed, shaking her head in disbelief. "And just because I'm your stepdaughter, you think that gives you the right to control my life?" she shot back. She had had enough. Enough of Emma's manipulations, enough of her cruelty. If she had known what kind of woman Emma truly was, she would have done everything in her power to prevent her father from ever marrying her. Her father, James, had been a kind and devoted man, but life had not been kind in return. After losing his first wife, he had eventually remarried, hoping to rebuild his life. And for a time, things seemed fine. That was, until a stroke left him unable to work, vulnerable in the hands of the wrong woman. Jessica inhaled deeply, steadying herself. She met Emma's gaze, her expression unreadable, her voice as cold as steel. "I will not marry a man I don't know, and your debts are not my burden to bear," she declared firmly. And nothing would change her mind. Emma's lips curled into a cruel smile as she watched Jessica's defiant expression. "You can refuse all you want," she said, her voice laced with quiet amusement. "But let me make one thing clear. Whether you agree or not, you will walk down that aisle." With that, she stood up gracefully, reaching for her designer handbag as if the conversation had been nothing more than a trivial discussion. Without sparing Jessica another glance, she turned on her heels and strode toward the door, her heels clicking against the polished floor. Just as she was about to step out, she paused. Slowly, she turned her head and fixed Jessica with a sharp, piercing gaze. "Don't even think about running away," she warned in a sickly sweet tone. "I can abandon James any time. With that final chilling threat, she disappeared, the door clicking shut behind her. Silence fell over the room. Jessica's breathing came in short, uneven bursts. Her hands balled into tight fists, her nails digging into her palms so hard they almost broke the skin. "Damn stepmother," she hissed through clenched teeth, her voice filled with raw fury. The words echoed through the empty room, but there was no one to hear them. At least, that's what she thought. Suddenly, the door swung open again. Jessica's head snapped up in alarm, only to find a familiar figure stepping inside. A woman, about her age, entered with the effortless grace of someone accustomed to power. Dressed in a tailored blazer and slacks, she carried an air of quiet sophistication. Her sleek ponytail swayed slightly as she moved, her sharp eyes locking onto Jessica's tense frame. "What's going on, Bev?" the woman asked, her voice filled with concern. "I just saw your mom storm out of here. Did you two have another fight?" Jessica let out a bitter scoff. "Mom?" she repeated mockingly. "Don't call her that, Serafina." She rubbed her temples, feeling the beginnings of a headache forming. Serafina, her best friend, took a seat across from her. She leaned forward, brows furrowed in worry. "You look like hell. What did she do this time?" Jessica exhaled sharply. "She's trying to sell me off, Sarah," she said, her voice thick with frustration. "She wants to use me to pay off her debts." Serafina's eyes widened. "What?" Jessica nodded, her fingers tightening around the edge of her desk. "Emma, with her ridiculous obsession with luxury, has racked up credit card debt in the millions. She was drowning in bills, didn't know how to pay them off, so she did what she always does, found a way to exploit someone else." Serafina's expression darkened. Who the hell would be stupid enough to loan her that much money? Jessica let out a dry laugh. "Michael Oliver," she said flatly. "James's boss. He lent her millions. Probably because James was one of his most trusted employees, Michael agreed to help her out." Serafina sat back, stunned. "And let me guess, instead of paying him back like a normal person, she decided to trade you instead?" "Exactly," Jessica muttered. Sometimes she wanted nothing more than to throw Emma out of her father's house, but that was impossible. James loved her, irrationally so. It made no sense. How could he be so blind? Had Emma put him under some kind of spell? Serafina shook her head, disgusted. "That woman is insane." Jessica's jaw clenched. "You think that's bad? She wants me to marry a man I don't even know? What?" Serafina shot up from her seat, eyes blazing with fury. "Are you kidding me? What the hell is wrong with her? That's insane." Jessica bit her lip anxiously. "And if I don't do it, she'll leave my dad to suffer alone?" Serafina let out a frustrated groan, running a hand through her hair. "This is unbelievable." Jessica swallowed hard. A part of her already knew she had no choice, but the thought of giving in made her sick to her stomach. Serafina suddenly turned to her, eyes gleaming with an idea. "What if you ran away?" she suggested. Jessica didn't even hesitate. "I can't leave my father," she said firmly, her voice laced with quiet despair. "James is sick. If I run, Emma won't hesitate to abandon him. I can't let that happen." She shook her head, as if trying to ward off the thought. Serafina pressed her lips together, thinking, "How much is the debt? Maybe I can help. I could lend you $100,000. Jessica let out a weary sigh. "It's more than that. Even if you sold this cafe, it wouldn't be enough." "There's no way out, Sarah. If Emma goes through with this, I'll be trapped. They'll never let me go." Her voice trembled, her fingers tightening into fists. "My life will be over." Serafina slammed her palm against the table, making the cups and silverware rattle. "This is outrageous," she fumed. "If I ever see Emma, I swear I'll punch those ridiculously overfilled lips of hers." But then, her expression shifted. She studied Jessica intently, her sharp eyes filled with doubt. "Are you absolutely sure she's serious? Would she really go through with this? I mean, you're still her daughter, after all." Jessica's response was nothing more than a weak shake of her head. Did Emma truly intend to do this to her? She wasn't sure, but what she did know was that the mere thought of it was enough to send a shiver down her spine. At that moment, a knock at the door broke through the tense silence. A young waitress entered, balancing a tray in one hand and holding a delicate envelope in the other. The ivory-yellow paper gleamed under the cafe's warm lighting, the gold trim catching the light like something precious. Resting on top of it was a smaller folded note, tied with a silky golden ribbon. "Miss Holmes, this just arrived for you," the waitress said politely, extending the invitation. Jessica frowned in confusion. An invitation? Hesitantly, she took it from the waitress's outstretched hand. Her name was printed neatly on the envelope. Jessica Holmes, her frown deepened. Who was getting married? She hadn't heard anything about any upcoming weddings among her friends or co-workers. A gnawing sense of unease settled in her stomach as she slowly untied the golden ribbon. With slightly trembling fingers, she unfolded the invitation and scanned the elegant script inside. For a long moment she didn't move. The world seemed to still around her. Her breath caught in her throat, her vision blurred at the edges, her heart hammering so hard it felt like it might burst. The bride's name was printed clearly, in delicate, swirling calligraphy, Jessica Holmes. No, 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 no. Her lips parted, but no sound came out. A suffocating dread washed over her as she forced her eyes downward, looking for the groom's name, William Oliver. Her fingers went ice cold. The invitation slipped from her grasp, floating soundlessly to the floor. "Bev? What's wrong?" Serafina asked, alarmed. "Who's getting married?" Jessica couldn't answer. Her mind was blank with shock. Serafina bent down, picking up the discarded invitation. As soon as her eyes landed on the names, her reaction was just as severe. Her mouth fell open in disbelief. "The date. Jessica, when is the wedding?" she demanded, her voice urgent. Jessica snatched the invitation back, her pulse roaring in her ears. Her eyes darted to the date, printed in elegant gold ink. The 17th. Jessica's body went numb. Her breath hitched, her pulse quickening as she stared at the gilded letters on the invitation. The 17th, that meant... Her entire body tensed as the realization struck her like a lightning bolt. It was already the 16th. The wedding was tomorrow. A chilling sensation crept up her spine. It felt as if the ground beneath her had crumbled, sending her soul plummeting into a bottomless abyss. Emma had mentioned this marriage before, but Jessica had naively assumed there would be time. Time to argue, time to fight back, time to change her fate. But that time had never existed. Emma had already sealed her fate long ago. Her chest tightened, a suffocating weight pressing down on her ribs. How could she do this? Had Emma truly never once considered her feelings? Had she ever thought of Jessica as anything more than a bargaining chip? "Bev." Serafina's voice was soft, almost hesitant. She reached out and rubbed Jessica's back in slow, soothing circles, trying to ground her. But how could anything soothe this? Jessica's grip tightened around the invitation, her knuckles turning white. Then, all at once, her sorrow hardened into something colder, sharper. "I have to see Emma," she said, her voice steel. She grabbed the invitation, along with the folded letter that still remained unread. She didn't need to read it. She already knew what it would say. Lies, manipulation, justifications. Straightening her back, she forced herself to breathe. "I'll drive you," Serafina offered immediately, snatching up her car keys. Without another word, the two of them strode out of the cafe. Serafina stopped briefly to leave instructions with the cashier before following Jessica outside. The drive was quiet, tense. Jessica sat rigidly in the passenger seat, staring out the window as the city blurred past. Neon lights reflected against the car's glass, distorting her hollow expression. One more night. That was all she had left. One more night of being free? If she did nothing, by this time tomorrow she would be a wife, a stranger's wife. Jessica exhaled sharply and rubbed her face, as if trying to wipe away the dreadful reality pressing down on her. The car slowed, and then, there it was. A lavish 3-story house stood before them, its grand structure illuminated under the night sky. The sight of it only fueled Jessica's rage. That house could have paid off Emma's debts. That house could have saved them all, but Emma had never even considered that option. No, instead of sacrificing her luxury, she had chosen to sacrifice Jessica. Jessica didn't wait. She threw open the car door and stormed toward the entrance, her grip tightening around the invitation as though it were a weapon. "Emma!" She stabbed the doorbell repeatedly, each press more forceful than the last. "Bev, calm down," Serafina murmured, stepping beside her. Jessica turned, her eyes blazing. "Calm down? How can I be calm, Serafina? She's treating me like..." Her voice caught, her throat tightening as rage and despair twisted inside her. Before she could say another word, the heavy front door creaked open, but But it wasn't Emma standing there. Instead, a middle-aged woman in a neatly pressed servant's uniform appeared, her expression unreadable. Jessica's anger didn't wane. If anything, it burned hotter. She had come for Emma, and she wasn't leaving until she got what she wanted. "Miss?" Jessica's head snapped toward the voice. Aunt Jane stood in the doorway, her expression calm, yet unreadable. "Aunt Jane, where's Emma?" Jessica demanded, cutting straight to the point. The older woman hesitated before replying. "Madam hasn't come home since she left this afternoon." Jessica clenched her jaw, frustration simmering beneath her skin. Where did she go? "I'm not sure," Aunt Jane admitted. Jessica exhaled sharply. Of course. Emma was always slippery, always conveniently absent when it mattered most. "Bev, maybe you could see your dad while you wait for Emma to come home," Serafina suggested gently. Jessica hesitated, then nodded. Together they stepped inside. The house was grand, immaculate, and utterly lifeless. The silence clung to the air like a heavy fog, suffocating and cold. There was no warmth, no love, only expensive furniture and walls that had never truly felt like home. "Aunt Jane, does Emma always leave like this?" Jessica asked, her voice quieter but no less firm. "During the day, Madam is usually home," Aunt Jane said carefully, "but at night she often goes out." Jessica sighed. Of course she did. Without another word, she turned and made her way toward her father's room. The door creaked softly as she pushed it open. The sight inside made her chest ache. James Holmes lay in bed, his body frail, his once strong frame reduced to a shadow of the man he used to be. His face, once full of warmth and laughter, was now lined with exhaustion, and the left side drooped slightly from the effects of his stroke. Jessica swallowed hard, forcing a bright smile. "Dad," his eyes flickered toward her, filled with confusion. Jessica moved forward, gently wrapping her arms around him. She felt how thin he had become, how fragile. "You must be wondering why I'm home early," she whispered, squeezing his hand. "I was supposed to come back on Monday, but I missed you too much." James's lips parted slightly as if he wanted to say something, but no words came. Jessica's heart clenched. "Dad, I can't stay long. Serafina's here too. Actually, I was hoping to talk to..." She froze mid-sentence. Outside, the sound of engines rumbled through the air. Several cars had just pulled up in front of the house. Jessica stiffened. Had Emma finally come back? She turned toward the window, peering out as dusk settled over the estate. Emma's car was there, but it wasn't alone. Jessica's stomach twisted at the sight of several sleek black vehicles parked behind it. Something wasn't right. Her pulse quickened. "Dad, I need to go see Emma for a minute," she said, pressing a quick kiss to his cheek. "I love you." Then, without waiting for a response, she rushed out of the room. Jessica descended the staircase in hurried steps, her heart hammering against her ribs. And then, the front door swung open, Emma walked in, and behind her several men dressed in black followed. Jessica's breath caught. Who were they, and why did their presence make her blood run cold? "Well, well, so you really are here." Emma's voice rang through the grand foyer as she stepped forward, her sharp gaze locking onto Jessica. Jessica gritted her teeth, her fingers tightening around the ivory-yellow invitation in her hand. "What the hell is this?" She held it up, shaking it slightly. Her voice trembled, but not with fear. Pure rage boiled beneath her skin. "Are you out of your mind? Since when did you plan this?" Emma sighed theatrically, tilting her head with a feigned look of regret. "Honey, I've done everything I can to take care of our family. If I've let you down, I'm truly sorry." Lies. Every word was drenched in deception. Jessica could see it. The empty sorrow in Emma's eyes, the barely concealed smirk tugging at her lips. "Stop it!" Jessica snapped, disgust curling in her stomach. "You make me sick!" Emma simply shrugged. "Call me whatever you want, dear, but I suggest you start packing now. Mr. Oliver's men are already here, and I doubt they'll wait much longer." Her gaze flicked toward the men in black standing behind her. Jessica followed her line of sight, her pulse hammering in her ears. The men stood motionless, their expressions unreadable, but their presence alone sent a chill down her spine. And then it hit her. They were here to take her. Forcibly, her breath caught in her throat. The room tilted slightly as the reality of the situation sank in. This wasn't just a threat. This was happening. Jessica opened her mouth, but no words came out. Her mind reeled, grasping for something, anything, to say, but the shock was too great, swallowing her voice whole. "Emma?" Serafina finally spoke, stepping forward. Her voice was tight, barely restrained. "Shouldn't you reconsider this? You're treating her like some object to be sold off." Emma's lips curled into a saccharine smile. "Serafina, dear, I'm her mother," she said smoothly. "I know what's best for her." "No, you don't," Jessica shot back, her fury boiling over. "This isn't what's best, this is a nightmare." And without thinking, without hesitating, she ripped the invitation in half. The torn pieces fluttered to the floor like dying autumn leaves. For a moment, silence hung thick in the air. Then a small folded piece of paper slipped from the ruined invitation and landed at Emma's feet. Emma's eyes lit up. Swiftly, she bent down, snatching it up before Jessica could react. Jessica's heart pounded. What was that? Emma unfolded the paper, her expression shifting, brightening. "Ah," she breathed, her lips curling upward. "Bev, you might want to read this first." Jessica didn't hesitate. She lunged forward and snatched the paper from Emma's hands, and then, before her stepmother could say another word, she tore it to shreds. Her hands trembled, her breath ragged. She had had enough. Jessica was fed up. With everything. With Emma. With this nightmare. With the unbearable weight crushing down on her. She wanted to disappear, to vanish into the night and leave all of this behind. But she knew that was impossible. "Fool!" Emma's shriek cut through the air like a whip, her face twisting in fury. "Are you going to get ready now, or do you want them to drag you away?" Jessica's blood boiled. "I'm not going with them," she screamed, her voice raw with defiance. Her chest heaved, her vision blurred with rage. "Serafina, let's get out of here." Without thinking, she grabbed Serafina's wrist and lunged toward the door. But the men in black were faster. A wall of solid muscle blocked their escape. Before she could react, a firm, unyielding grip clamped down on her arm, yanking her backward. The force tore her away from Serafina. "Jessica!" Serafina cried out, trying to reach her, but the men shoved her back, cutting her off completely. A deep, cold voice rumbled beside Jessica. "Miss, we can make this easy, or we can make it rough." The brute holding her tightened his grip. His fingers dug into her skin like iron shackles. Jessica's entire body tensed. "Let me go," she snarled, her voice shaking with fury. The men exchanged silent glances, and then, without another word, they dragged her away. "No, stop!" Jessica thrashed wildly, kicking, clawing, doing anything to break free, but it was useless. Their strength dwarfed hers. "Let go of me, you bastards!" she shrieked, her voice echoing through the grand house. No one came, no one stopped them. The world was deaf to her cries. Serafina's panicked voice rang behind her, but Jessica could barely hear it over the pounding in her ears. The next thing she knew, a door slammed shut. The scent of leather and cold air hit her. She was inside the car. Two men flanked her, their massive frames caging her in. Jessica's breath came in ragged gasps. She wanted to cry, to scream, to plead, but she knew it wouldn't change a thing. Slowly, she raised her gaze. Outside the car window, looming against the night sky, a massive, ominous estate. Not a house, a prison, and there was no way out. One might call it a mansion, but to Jessica, it felt more like a gilded cage. The estate loomed before her, bathed in the pale glow of the moon. Bone-white walls stretched high into the night sky, their towering presence casting long, eerie shadows. The architecture was nothing short of breathtaking, grand, elegant, and meticulously designed. Yet Jessica felt nothing. No awe, no admiration, no attachment. She could not, would not, spend her life here, trapped with a man she did not love, in a place that felt nothing like home. The night wind whispered through her hair, sending shivers down her spine. Her heart pounded, her thoughts spiraling into chaos. Was this real, or was she still asleep at the cafe table, lost in a terrible dream? "Miss, please come in." The deep voice shattered her thoughts, yanking her back to reality. Jessica inhaled sharply. No, this was not a dream. This nightmare was real. With heavy steps, she crossed the threshold into the grand mansion. Two men in black flanked her, their presence a constant reminder that this was not her choice. The entrance doors had already been thrown open, as if they had been expecting her. The moment she stepped inside, an unfamiliar atmosphere wrapped around her. Servants, dozens of them, stood at rigid attention, their postures flawless, their faces blank. Each wore the same crisp black and white uniform, their hair meticulously styled, their hands clasped in front of them like statues. Jessica swallowed. It was unsettling. Then, a man stepped forward. He was older, perhaps in his late 40s, his neatly combed graying hair adding an air of authority. Unlike the others, he carried himself with a quiet confidence, his expression calm but unreadable. He offered a polite, measured smile. "Miss Holmes, welcome to the Oliver family mansion." Jessica exhaled slowly. "Thank you," she murmured, though the words tasted bitter on her tongue. She wasted no time. "Can I see Michael Oliver?" she asked, her voice steady but firm. The butler's smile remained, though his head shook slightly. "I'm sorry, miss. The great lord does not reside in this mansion." Jessica frowned. "Then what about William Oliver?" she pressed. Her heart beat faster. If nothing else, she wanted to at least see the man she was being forced to marry. But the butler's answer only deepened her confusion. "He's not here either," Jessica's breath caught. "Not here?" Her gaze flickered around the vast space, the pristine marble floors, the towering chandeliers, the perfectly polished furniture. Everything screamed wealth and power. But something was missing. A house this grand, yet empty? Her fingers curled into fists at her sides. What kind of place was this? This magnificent building was eerily silent. No murmur of conversation, no distant footsteps, no signs of life beyond the still figures of the servants who stood like statues. It felt abandoned, yet it wasn't. Jessica's skin prickled with unease. "Miss, you must be confused," the butler said, his tone steady but unreadable. "Come with me, I can't explain much for now." Jessica hesitated, then gave a weak nod. Her gaze swept across the line of uniformed servants before she stepped forward, following the man who, at this moment, seemed to be the only one she could rely on. The butler led her up a grand staircase, its white marble steps gleaming under the chandelier's golden glow. The second floor was no less imposing. A long, seemingly endless hallway stretched before her, lined with doors, each pristine white, each concealing secrets she wasn't sure she wanted to uncover. Then the butler stopped. With practiced ease, he opened one of the doors, revealing an opulent bedroom. Jessica's breath caught. The space was vast, almost unnervingly so. A grand bed stood at its center, the velvet sheets so smooth they seemed untouched. A vanity, a wardrobe, a plush seating area, all meticulously arranged, all exuding luxury. Yet, like the rest of the house, the room felt cold. "Miss, you may spend the night here," the butler announced. "Tomorrow, someone will come to take you to the event." The event. Her wedding. Jessica let out a bitter laugh under her breath. "Of course," she murmured. She stepped inside, the weight of reality pressing heavier with each passing second. "Thank you," she added, though the words lacked warmth. Before the butler could leave, she turned. If I may ask, what's your name?" The man paused, then gave a slight nod. "Just call me Edward." Jessica nodded vaguely. "You can leave me now. I'd like to be alone." "As you wish. Good night, Miss Holmes." With that, Edward closed the door behind him, leaving Jessica alone in the vast emptiness of the room. She turned to the window. The glass stretched from floor to ceiling, offering a view of the backyard. The night sky loomed beyond, the moon casting a pale glow over the perfectly manicured garden. She checked the clock on the wall. It was late. Yet sleep felt impossible. She had no bag, no phone, no way to reach Seraphia. She was truly alone. With a deep sigh, Jessica lay down on the impossibly soft mattress. But no amount of comfort could ease the storm raging in her mind. Tonight would be long, and tomorrow she would wake up as someone's bride. It wasn't until the first light of dawn bled through the curtains that Jessica's eyelids grew heavy. Sleep finally took her. Briefly, 3 hours later, the sharp creak of a door opening yanked her from restless slumber. Her lashes fluttered. A blur of movement filled her vision. Several women entered, carrying suitcases, followed by a flowing white gown draped across delicate silk hangers. Jessica shot upright, "Good morning, Miss Holmes. Did you sleep well last night?" The sickly sweet voice grated against her already frayed nerves. A man had strolled into the room, his fur scarf draped dramatically over his shoulders. His plump figure radiated confidence, and his exaggerated gestures were almost theatrical. Jessica wanted to curse. Was this man blind? Her reflection in the vanity mirror told the truth. Dark circles clung stubbornly beneath her eyes. Her complexion was dull, her lips pressed into a tight, unimpressed line. And yet, he had the audacity to ask if she had slept well? She had barely managed 3 hours. It was nowhere near enough. "Okay, wake up, sweetheart," he trilled, clapping his hands together. "You need to get ready now. I'll do your special day's makeup myself." Special day? Jessica almost laughed. This wasn't a special day. It was a cursed one. But she bit her tongue. Fighting now would only waste more energy. Suppressing a sigh, she dragged herself toward the bathroom, her movements slow and deliberate. The warm water did little to soothe her growing frustration. The longer she stayed under the spray, the more she hoped time would simply stop. A sharp knock shattered the illusion. "Miss Holmes, we don't have all morning." Jessica rolled her eyes before finally stepping out. As soon as she emerged, the man beamed. "Good, sit here, dear. I'm going to start applying your makeup now," he said, already setting out an array of products. Jessica exhaled, forcing herself into the chair. "Fine, let's get this over with." The sooner she was ready, the sooner she could meet William Oliver. And if she could meet him before the ceremony began, perhaps she could negotiate. A slow, calculating smile curled at the corners of her lips. That's right, this wasn't over yet. The person she needed to speak with was William Oliver, a man she had never met. And that was exactly why she still had hope. If they had never crossed paths before, surely he didn't care for her. Perhaps he would be just as unwilling as she was. A flicker of optimism bloomed in Jessica's chest, fragile but persistent. With that thought in mind, she shut her eyes, allowing the flamboyant makeup artist to work his magic. She didn't care about the colors he used, the brushes he swiped across her face, or the delicate powders dusting her skin. None of it mattered. What mattered was seeing William. Soon minutes stretched into what felt like hours. By the time the final stroke of makeup was applied, Jessica exhaled, feeling drained from simply sitting there. Then she opened her eyes, and for a moment, she didn't recognize herself. The reflection staring back at her was breathtaking. Her complexion was flawless, her features accentuated to perfection. The woman in the mirror radiated a beauty so striking it could rival Hollywood's most celebrated actresses. Jessica swallowed. Was this really her? Behind her, the makeup artist gasped dramatically, his hands clasped together as if witnessing a masterpiece come to life. "Wow, you look absolutely stunning, honey," he gushed, practically squealing in delight. Jessica's brow twitched. "Don't call me honey," she muttered, her patience already thin. He waved her off, still beaming. "Fine, fine. Now let's get you into this magnificent wedding gown." Jessica hesitated. The idea of stripping down in front of an audience, especially this overly enthusiastic man, sent a wave of discomfort through her. Fortunately, he seemed to sense her reluctance. With a knowing smile, he twirled dramatically toward the door. "All right, darlings, I'll leave you to it. Assistants, make sure she looks like a goddess when I return." The moment he exited, his team moved in, gently guiding Jessica into the gown. The process was painstaking. Layer upon layer of luxurious fabric cascaded down her frame, adorned with shimmering diamonds that caught the light. The dress was exquisite, elegant, regal, suffocating. The weight of it pressed down on her like a cage spun from silk and jewels. Jessica clenched her jaw. Never again, she would never wear something this extravagant again. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the preparations were complete. And then the door swung open. A familiar chill ran down her spine as several men dressed in black stepped inside. They were the same ones who had dragged her here the night before. One of them, the tallest, took a step forward. "The time has come, Miss Holmes," he announced, his voice devoid of emotion. "We must leave now." Jessica's fingers curled into fists. This was it, the moment she had been dreading. But she wasn't ready to surrender just yet. Not until she saw William. Not until she knew whether he was her escape or just another part of this prison. Jessica snorted softly, her discomfort evident. The dress was heavy, the intricate layers suffocating against her skin. Every movement felt restrictive, as though she were wrapped in a cage of silk and diamonds. Sensing her struggle, several servants quickly moved in, lifting the hem of her gown to help her walk more easily. Outside, a sleek black car waited at the entrance of the mansion. Jessica hesitated for a brief moment before stepping forward. With some effort and an embarrassing amount of fumbling, she finally slid into the back seat. The moment the door shut, the car lurched forward, speeding toward the wedding venue. Her fingers twitched restlessly in her lap. Her emotions were in complete turmoil. Was this how brides usually felt? She wasn't sure. Her hands clenched and unclenched as she tried to suppress the rising panic. Her throat felt dry. She swallowed hard, but it didn't help. Just yesterday morning, she had been making coffee behind the counter of a cafe, and today, she was being driven to her own forced wedding. How had everything unraveled so quickly? Her thoughts screeched to a halt as the car pulled up in front of an imposing skyscraper. Jessica's breath hitched. A sea of people had gathered outside the entrance. Reporters. Dozens of them, clutching notebooks, microphones, and cameras. The flashing lights began the moment they spotted her, their lenses zeroing in like vultures, circling prey. Jessica's pulse pounded in her ears. "Oh, for God's sake, what now?" A low voice interrupted her thoughts. "Miss, there's a lot of media present. Behave properly. Remember?" The man in black beside her leaned in, his voice laced with quiet menace. "Your father's life is in your hands." Jessica's stomach clenched, her breath hitched, but she quickly masked the fear in her eyes. Lowering her gaze, she took a slow, steadying breath before stepping out of the car. The cameras went wild. One of the men in black discreetly helped lift the hem of her dress as she walked toward the grand entrance. With each step, her nerves coiled tighter. The moment she reached the doorway, the reporters pounced. A barrage of voices exploded around her, their questions colliding into a chaotic storm. But one particular topic caught her attention. "Miss Holmes, what do you have to say about the rumors regarding William Oliver's—" "Miss Holmes, can you confirm if your fiancé is—" "Miss Holmes, is the wedding real, or is it a cover-up for—" Jessica stiffened. Her grip tightened around the folds of her gown. May rumors? She had no idea what they were talking about. Hell, she didn't even know what William Oliver looked like. Keeping her gaze down, she ignored their prying questions and quickened her pace. Right now, she wasn't interested in rumors. She only cared about one thing: meeting the man who held the key to her fate. Fortunately, the bodyguards shielded her from the chaos, guiding her through the throng of reporters with practiced efficiency. Jessica barely had time to breathe before she was ushered inside the building. The moment the heavy doors shut behind her, sealing her away from the deafening roar of the press, she exploded. Even if he wants to use this wedding to clear the rumors, did he really need to invite every reporter in the city? She snapped, frustration tightening her voice. One of the black-clad men beside her answered in a calm, detached tone. "Miss, the more people who know, the better." Jessica let out a sharp, disbelieving snort. Of course. The bigger the audience, the better the show. This entire event wasn't about her. It was about William Oliver. About fixing his image, silencing speculation, and giving the world exactly what it wanted to see. Her fingers curled tightly around the layers of her gown as she walked forward, her gaze darting left and right, searching. She needed some kind of sign, some kind of clue about this mysterious man she was about to marry. Was he watching her from somewhere, hiding in the shadows? Would he show up at the last second to call this off? Her heart pounded with a mixture of apprehension and dread. But as she moved through the vast corridor, passing countless faceless attendees and lavish decorations, she found nothing. No hints, no answers, nothing but the suffocating weight of uncertainty. Then, suddenly, "My dear daughter, you look absolutely stunning today." The overly sweet voice sent a shiver of irritation down Jessica's spine. She didn't need to turn to know who it was. Emma, her stepmother, had been waiting for her at the entrance to the grand wedding hall, dressed in a strikingly extravagant gown. Her makeup was flawless, her jewelry glinting under the bright chandelier lights. Always the performer, always playing her part. Jessica didn't even spare her a glance. She simply snorted coldly and kept walking. There was no point in engaging. No point in wasting her energy on a woman who had never once treated her as family. Still, a pang of sadness twisted inside her chest. Her father James wasn't here. She had known it from the start, but now that she was standing on the threshold of this moment, the absence felt heavier than she had expected. Was it because of his health, or had he even been told about this wedding at all? Jessica bit the inside of her cheek, forcing the questions away. There was no time for sentimentality. A deep voice suddenly broke through the tense air. The time has come. The bride may enter now. Jessica's breath hitched. The wedding hall doors loomed before her, massive and foreboding. Emma moved toward her, ready to take her arm and lead her inside. Jessica stepped away, her voice like ice. "I don't need anyone to accompany me." Emma's expression darkened for a brief second, displeased, but she did not argue. Instead, she simply adjusted her gown with an air of indifference and took a step back. The grand doors groaned as they slowly swung open. A rush of light and sound flooded the corridor, and Jessica's pulse quickened. Her gaze lifted, and then, at the far end of the aisle, standing tall at the wedding altar, she finally saw him, William Oliver. The man she was about to marry. The man in the black tuxedo stood at the altar, his gaze locked onto hers. Jessica felt the weight of his stare, intense, unwavering, inescapable. Her breath hitched. No, 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 no! A whirlwind of memories crashed into her mind, dragging her into a past she had fought desperately to forget. Dark, suffocating images swirled before her eyes, distorting reality. Her vision blurred, her fingers turned cold, her heart pounded once, then stopped. For a moment, the world around her faded into a distant hum. That man. Jessica's lips parted slightly as if she wanted to say something, but no words came out. A sharp, invisible force seemed to clamp around her throat. Her feet stumbled backward, moving on pure instinct. Run. She had to get out of here. But then, William's eyes, deep and dark as an abyss, locked onto her with an unreadable intensity. Jessica froze. It was as if an unseen chain had wrapped around her ankles, rooting her to the ground. Her pulse hammered against her ribs, her breathing quick and uneven. No, this couldn't be happening. Why are you just standing there? The sharp whisper slashed through her haze like a blade. Jessica flinched. Emma! The woman's voice was low and urgent, edged with thinly veiled irritation. Jessica didn't have to look at her stepmother to know she was forcing a smile. Her fingers likely curled into a tight, controlled grip. Emma's reputation mattered more than anything, and right now, Jessica was ruining her perfect show. All around them, the murmurs began. Dozens of guests turned their heads, their gazes filled with curiosity, speculation. Jessica could feel their stares, their judgment, their silent questions hanging heavy in the air. Emma leaned in ever so slightly, her voice like poisoned honey. "Move," she hissed. "Now!" Jessica's hands curled into fists at her sides. A wave of anger shot through her veins, searing and unrelenting. She wanted to lash out. She wanted to turn to Emma and spit every cruel thought she had ever swallowed. She wanted to scream, but she couldn't. Not here, not with every pair of eyes glued to her, waiting for her next move. Jessica inhaled deeply, her chest rising and falling as she forced air into her lungs. Then, finally, she surrendered. Her shoulders tensed as she took a step forward, then another and another. Her feet carried her toward the altar, but she felt nothing. No defiance, no strength, no hope. Just the crushing weight of inevitability pressing down on her. By the time she reached him, she could barely breathe. Jessica finally lifted her gaze, her pulse deafening in her ears. There he was, William Oliver, the man whose piercing eyes had haunted her for months, the man she was about to marry, the man who might just destroy her. Jessica's eyes burned. A sharp sting pressed against the back of her throat, but she refused to let even a single tear fall. Not here. Not in front of him. Lowering her head, she tried to steady herself, but her heart was hammering wildly against her ribs. How? How had she ended up here, standing before this man, the very man who, 3 months ago, Jessica's stomach twisted. 3 months ago she had lived through a nightmare, a night she wished she could erase, a night that still haunted her, lurking in the darkest corners of her mind. A drunk man, a terrifying struggle, a desperate fight to break free. And now, her gaze flickered up to William's face, and her breath caught in her throat. This man looked exactly like him, too similar. They weren't standing at the altar. If dozens of people weren't watching, Jessica knew what she would do. She would punch him, she would kick him, she would smash that infuriatingly handsome face until not a single trace of his arrogance remained. Her fingers curled into fists at her sides. She hated him. She hated him with every fiber of her being. Even if she married him today, she would never love him. Even if they lived under the same roof, even if they shared the same bed, he would never acknowledge this man as her husband. Never. On the other side, William wasn't faring any better. His jaw clenched so tightly Jessica could see the sharp cut of his cheekbones. His hands were balled into fists, a silent declaration of his own suppressed fury. He was angry, furious even. Not just at the situation, but at the woman standing before him. Even if she was stunningly beautiful, even if she had curves that could drive men insane, even if she… No, William gritted his teeth. He swore he would never love her. Not now. Not ever. This marriage was nothing more than a business deal, a strategy to protect his family's name. If not for that, he wouldn't have even glanced at her. He wouldn't have wasted a second of his time on a woman like Jessica Holmes. Since the bride and groom have arrived, the wedding will now commence, the officiant announced, his voice echoing through the grand hall. Jessica's heart pounded in her ears. This was it. The moment was happening. She squeezed her eyes shut for a brief second, willing herself to breathe. Marriage wasn't the end. It wasn't the end of her life. Once this was over, she would find a way out. She would make William divorce her. It wouldn't be that hard, right? Wouldn't it? The ceremony dragged on, each vow feeling emptier than the last. Jessica spoke when required, moved when directed, all while feeling like she was drowning in slow, suffocating despair. Then came the ring exchange. And then Jessica's stomach dropped. The final act, the sealing of the marriage, the kiss. Tradition claimed that the first kiss after a wedding bound the couple together. It symbolized love, devotion, commitment. But what if there was no love, no devotion, no commitment? What was there to seal? Jessica's lips parted, ready to refuse. But before she could take a step back, a strong arm wrapped around her waist. Her body was yanked forward, colliding against his firm chest. A gasp left her lips. William's hand found the nape of her neck, tilting her face up. Jessica barely had a second to react before his lips crashed onto hers. Her eyes widened in shock. Her body went rigid. What was this bastard doing? Her mind screamed at her to push him away, to slap him, to tear herself free. But then, the realization struck her like a bolt of lightning. The way he held her, the way he kissed her. It wasn't hesitant, it wasn't reluctant, it wasn't the kiss of a man forced into marriage. No, it was far too familiar, too practiced, too much like… Her heart stopped. There was no mistaking it. Jessica knew. She knew now without a shadow of a doubt. The man who had almost hurt her that night, the man who had haunted her nightmares. It had been him. It had been William Oliver all along. Bastard, damn him to hell. Jessica cursed the man over and over again in her mind. Every bitter word, every seething insult burned inside her, but none of them could escape her lips. Then, just as abruptly as it had begun, William broke the kiss. His dark eyes bore into hers, sharp and unreadable. Jessica's stomach clenched. Her gut told her to run, but it was already too late for that. Even if you don't like this, act like you do, William hissed, his lips brushing her ear. His voice was low, threatening, a quiet warning laced with control. Don't mess anything up. Jessica's hands curled into fists. The audacity she wanted to slap him, to claw at his smug, arrogant face, but instead, she smiled. A sweet, dazzling, utterly fake smile. Cheers and applause erupted from the guests. The sound grated on her ears. What were they cheering for? What were they celebrating? Did they truly believe this was a joyous occasion? Suddenly, William's hand shot out and grabbed hers. It wasn't a gentle touch. His fingers squeezed around hers, firm, unrelenting, possessive. A silent command, play your part. Jessica gritted her teeth. Then, as if she had no say in the matter, William wrapped an arm around her waist and guided her forward, toward the man who awaited them. Michael Oliver. The aging patriarch of the Oliver family stood tall, leaning on an intricately carved wooden cane. A smile played on his lips, warm and fatherly. Yet Jessica couldn't shake the feeling that there was something more beneath it. William and his father embraced as if this was truly a touching, heartwarming moment. Jessica felt sick. Then, before she could step back, Michael turned to her. He placed his arms around her in a brief but firm hug. And then, a whisper. Soft, barely audible, "I'm sorry, you were already a victim." Jessica stiffened. Her eyes snapped up to Michael's, but his expression remained unreadable. What did he mean? What was he apologizing for? Her mind swirled with questions, but before she could voice a single one, William's grip tightened. "Talk about this another time," he muttered, already pulling her away. Damn William, damn all of them. The next few minutes passed in a blur. They were ushered through the crowd. Wests showered them with flower petals and wheat seeds, a supposed symbol of fertility and happiness. Photographers snapped endless pictures, capturing moments that meant nothing to her. She forced out polite smiles, murmured hollow thank yous, and played the role of the perfect bride. But inside she felt nothing. Then, a familiar figure appeared before her. Jessica's stomach churned with immediate disgust. A bright, overly sweet smile was plastered on Emma's face. "Congratulations, honey!" Emma gushed, stepping forward with open arms. "Finally, I can witness your happy day," Jessica finished bitterly in her head. Emma pulled her into a hug, her embrace firm yet meaningless. Jessica remained stiff, her face carefully schooled into a neutral expression. How fitting, how utterly fitting for this woman to play her part so well. A true snake. Emma pulled back and turned her attention to William, still grinning. "After this, I will trouble you to look after Bev. Hopefully your marriage will be filled with happiness," she said, her voice practically dripping with fake warmth. William barely acknowledged her. A brief nod, nodding more. Finally, they reached the exit. William's bodyguards and trusted men were already waiting by the car. A pristine white luxury vehicle adorned with elaborate floral decorations. The perfect car for the perfect fairy tale wedding. Only, this wasn't a fairy tale. And for Jessica, this wasn't a wedding. It was a prison sentence. She stared at the car with disdain. No amount of roses or silk ribbons could disguise the truth of what this day truly was. A nightmare. A beautifully packaged, exquisitely staged nightmare. Lifting the hem of her dress, Jessica stepped into the car. She let out a slow, shaky breath as she sank into the plush seat, exhaustion weighing down on her. A moment later, William followed. He settled into the seat beside her, his presence suffocating. Without a word, he ordered the driver to start the car. The engine roared to life, and the vehicle smoothly pulled away from the wedding hall. Silence filled the space between them, thick, unyielding. Jessica turned her head, staring blankly out the window. Her fingers twisted into the fabric of her dress, kneading it anxiously. The farther they drove, the deeper her anger settled. The memories clawed at her mind, the past she couldn't escape, the truth she was certain of now, and yet, William said nothing, no apology, no explanation, nothing. Did he really think she had forgotten? Did he really believe she would simply let it go? Jessica's jaw tightened. If he thought for a second that she would remain silent, he was wrong. So very wrong. Why? Why was William still saying nothing? Jessica's patience was wearing thin. The silence between them stretched, thick and suffocating. Then finally, "What's your name?" His voice cut through the quiet like a blade. Jessica blinked. Had he seriously just asked that? Like they weren't already married? Like they weren't stuck in this miserable arrangement together? She barely spared him a glance. "M," she muttered curtly. William scoffed. "You know this is just an arranged marriage," he said coldly, his voice void of warmth. "So I warn you." His eyes flicked to her, dark and unreadable. "Don't expect anything from me." Jessica turned to him sharply. A laugh, bitter and mocking, escaped her lips. "What do you think I expected?" she sneered. She met his gaze head-on, unflinching. "If you think I'm going to be some devoted wife, hoping for her husband's love, then you're dreaming." William's expression darkened. His jaw tensed. "You dare shout at me?" Jessica didn't answer. She simply turned her face toward the window, ignoring his piercing glare. Let him stew in his anger. She didn't care. But then, her brows furrowed. Something felt off. The car wasn't heading toward William's house. Where were they going? She clenched her fists in her lap, forcing herself to stay composed. No, he wouldn't ask. Wouldn't let him see even a hint of curiosity or concern. She refused to let him think she cared. Minutes later, the car rolled to a stop. Jessica glanced around. A basement parking lot. Not just any parking lot. A luxury hotel. Jessica turned to William, but before she could say a word, he beat her to it. "Don't go anywhere. Stay here, and don't make trouble," he ordered, his voice sharp and commanding. And then, he was gone. Jessica watched him disappear through the doors, her eyes narrowing. Where was he going? And why here? She let out a frustrated breath and leaned back against the seat. But just as she was about to close her eyes, something caught her attention. Up ahead, a woman. Jessica's gaze sharpened. The woman was dressed in a striking red dress, one that clung to her curves. If it weren't for the long coat draped over her, she'd be almost indecent. Sunglasses. A black fedora. Most of her face was hidden, but something about her. Something felt oddly familiar. Jessica's eyes narrowed further. Where had she seen her before? Before she could place it, William appeared, and what he did next... Jessica's breath hitched. He pulled the woman into a close embrace, and then he kissed her. Not just a brief peck. A slow, lingering kiss, first on her cheek, then her lips. Jessica stiffened. The woman didn't resist. She melted into his touch, wrapping her arms around him like this was something she had done 1,000 times before. The parking lot was eerily quiet. Hidden from prying eyes, no one would have noticed them. Except Jessica. Her fingers clenched against her arms as she crossed them over her chest. Her voice was steady but cold. "Who is she?" The driver, still seated in front, stiffened slightly at her question. A pause. Then, "I'm sorry, madam, I can't say that. Maybe you can ask Mr. Oliver directly?" Jessica rolled her eyes, exhaling sharply. Of course, he wouldn't answer. Her mind whirled, piecing together possibilities. Could she be William's lover? Had he already been in a relationship before this forced marriage? It wouldn't be surprising. Or maybe William was the type who juggled multiple women at once. So, then... How did the rumors start? The ones about him being into men? Jessica frowned. Nothing made sense. And honestly, she was exhausted trying to make sense of it. God, how did she end up marrying this man, out of all the men in the world? Surely there had to be someone better than him. Her gaze flicked back to the couple, watching her, heart pounded with unanswered questions. And a sinking feeling that she wouldn't like the answers. They walked side by side into the elevator. Jessica's stomach twisted. So that was it. They were heading into the hotel together. For what? Her mind raced. 2 people, a man and a woman, walking into a hotel at this hour. What else could it mean? The answer was obvious. Jessica clenched her fists, not because she was jealous. No, that wasn't it. It was the sheer audacity of it, leaving her waiting in the car like some fool. How long was she supposed to sit here? Did William even have a shred of common sense? If he wanted to go on a date with another woman, the least he could do was take her home first, not abandon her like this. Her fingers dug into the seat. Her patience snapped. "You!" Jessica's voice cut through the silence, sharp with frustration. "Take me home now." The driver flinched at the sudden command. "Madam, but Mr. Oliver asked you to stay here." "I can't." For God's sake, fine." Jessica threw her hands up in exasperation. "Do whatever you want. Stick to that bastard's orders if you want, but I am leaving." Before the driver could react, she shoved the door open and stepped out of the car. "Madam, wait." The driver scrambled after her, moving to block her path. "Please, get back inside. Mr. Oliver will be angry." Jessica arched a brow. "And? So what if he gets angry?" She crossed her arms, eyes glinting with defiance. "If anyone's going to suffer his temper, it'll be me, not you." Her lips curled into a smirk. "Now, step aside, or I swear I'll scream for help." The driver hesitated, a flicker of uncertainty flashing across his face. He had expected her to beg, to whine, to demand a ride home like a spoiled rich wife. But no. This woman was doing the opposite. "Madam, where exactly are you going?" he asked warily. Jessica flashed him a grin. "Wherever I want." Then, with a playful wink, If he can have fun with other women, then I can have fun with other men. The driver's jaw dropped. Tell your boss, don't bother looking for me, I'll be home before nightfall. A pause, then she chuckled. Ah, but I almost forgot. He probably won't be looking for me anyway. She turned on her heel, not sparing the driver another glance. Behind her, he exhaled in disbelief. Had Mr. Oliver finally met his match? A stubborn, headstrong woman just as reckless as he was? The marriage was starting to make sense. Jessica, of course, was unaware of his thoughts. She simply walked away from him. The hem of her wedding dress dragged along the pavement, drawing curious glances from passers-by. She barely noticed. What did he take her for? Some pathetic woman who would sit and wait? Ha! Even if he has 1,000 lovers, I still wouldn't care, she muttered under her breath. She had no interest in running off to find another man. That wasn't the point. She had somewhere better to be. Somewhere that mattered. Serafina's cafe. She'd rather be there, with her best friend, than waiting like a fool while her so-called husband fooled around in a hotel room. Jessica quickened her steps. The weight of the dress slowed her down, and the damn heels. With an irritated sigh, she kicked them off, picking them up in one hand. She continued barefoot, ignoring the confused stares of pedestrians, a bride, in a wedding dress, walking alone, barefoot, down the street. She could already imagine the gossip. Jessica huffed. Let them talk. She reached up, pulling her lacy white veil over her face. If people were going to stare, they could at least wonder who she was. With that, she kept walking. Head held high, unbothered, or at least, that's what she told herself, not out of shame. That wasn't why she covered her face. She just didn't want anyone to recognize her, didn't want anyone to know she was William Oliver's wife. That would be a problem, a very big problem. The walk to Serafina's cafe took longer than expected, much longer. She was on foot, after all. Her bare feet ached from the unforgiving pavement, every step sending tiny jolts of pain through her body. But she didn't care, that kind of pain. It was nothing compared to the pain of losing her mother. That wound had numbed her to everything else. Whatever, let them do whatever they want to me. If they sold her, betrayed her, treated her like she was disposable, it didn't matter. She would live. She promised herself that much. No matter what they did, she wouldn't break. She wouldn't end her own life just because of them. Her lips curled into a bitter smirk as she muttered under her breath, I won't give you that satisfaction. Her voice was eerily flat, devoid of emotion. Her heart had been hardened long ago. Meanwhile, in the dim glow of a luxurious hotel suite, a soft gasp filled the air as William pushed the woman in red onto the bed. His body hovered over hers, his hands pressing into the mattress beside her. She let out a small, sultry laugh. How much longer must I wait for you, William? His jaw tensed. Not now, he murmured. She pouted. Today was hard for me, you know, watching you marry her. She said the word like it was venom on her tongue. William's expression darkened. But I don't love her, he said simply. The woman's lips curved into a slow, knowing smile. I know. Her fingers traced his chest, teasingly slow. You only love me, right? William didn't answer. Not with words. Instead, he kissed her deeply, desperately, as if he needed to convince himself of the lie. I promise you, Miss Hale, he murmured against her lips. That day, Serafina's cafe was buzzing with customers. The scent of freshly brewed coffee and warm pastries filled the air, a stark contrast to the chaos brewing inside Jessica. The moment she stepped through the entrance, the entire cafe went silent. All eyes turned to her. How could they not? A woman in a wedding dress, barefoot, disheveled, sweating from head to toe. She was impossible to ignore. Oh my God! A loud gasp rang out. Serafina, who had been tallying up the cafe's finances, bolted from behind the counter. Her expression was a mix of shock and concern. Jessica, what the hell happened to you? Jessica barely had the strength to shake her head. Instead, she staggered toward the nearest chair, collapsing into it with a weary sigh. Water, she muttered. Please, just some cold water. She ripped off her veil, tossing it onto the table, along with the rest of her hair accessories. Serafina didn't hesitate. She waved over one of her staff. Get her some cold water, now. Moments later, a cold bottle was placed before Jessica. She didn't waste a second. She twisted off the cap and drank deeply, the icy liquid sliding down her throat like salvation. Finally, relief. She exhaled heavily, setting the bottle down with a dull thud. You know, she let out a hollow chuckle. This is so ridiculous. Serafina's brows knitted together. Jess, how did you even get here? What about your wedding? Did you run away? Jessica snorted. Run away? She let out a dry laugh, shaking her head. As if I could. She leaned back, rubbing her temples. I'm married, Serafina. Married. Her friend winced. And let me tell you, Jessica exhaled sharply. That guy, he's a complete and total jerk. Serafina hesitated before whispering, but he's hot, right? Jessica shot her a look. I saw him on the internet, Serafina added defensively. He's really handsome. Then, in an even lower whisper, is he really gay? Jessica scoffed. Absolutely not. Her fingers curled around the bottle as she muttered, he's just a filthy, shameless pervert. She exhaled, glancing down at her wedding dress. She had never felt more suffocated in her life. And for what? For him? God, what a joke. Forget about it, Jessica muttered, tugging at the fabric of her dress in frustration. I need to change. This thing is unbearable. Serafina's gaze dropped to the wedding gown. It was exquisite. Layers of delicate lace, intricate embroidery, and a long flowing train that once screamed elegance. But now the hem was frayed, streaked with dirt and stained beyond repair. The once pristine white fabric bore evidence of Jessica's reckless journey. Footprints, dust, and even a few faint scratches. Serafina sighed. Mrs. Oliver, it looks like you completely ruined the dress. Jessica's head snapped up. Don't call me that, she said flatly. Serafina chuckled, shaking her head. Fine, fine. Come on, I've got some clothes in the back. You can change into something comfortable. You're a lifesaver. Jessica mumbled. She didn't waste another second, following Serafina to the back room. Once she changed into a simple t-shirt and jeans, Jessica spent the rest of the day at the cafe. She refused to sit around doing nothing. Serafina had suggested she rest, but that was the last thing Jessica wanted. Rest meant thinking. Thinking meant remembering, and remembering meant dealing with him. So she chose to work instead, taking orders, wiping down tables, distracting herself with anything that kept her mind busy. Hours slipped by unnoticed. Until Serafina suddenly placed something on the table in front of her. Jessica blinked. It was her phone. You forgot this, Serafina said, crossing her arms. Jessica stared at it for a moment before realization hit. Oh, right. She had left it here yesterday. Reaching for it, she pressed the power button. Nothing. The battery was dead. With a careless shrug, she slipped the phone into her bag. The same bag she had abandoned in the cafe the night before. So, Serafina teased, leaning against the counter, are you heading back to work, or are you going to be a dutiful little wife now? Jessica snorted. Dutiful wife? Please. She shut her laptop with a soft click and took a slow sip of her coffee before setting the cup down. This marriage won't last long, she said firmly. So, I'm not quitting my job. Serafina watched her closely. Jessica met her gaze. This isn't a real marriage, Serafina. Don't compare me to a normal wife. I am not one. Serafina exhaled, shaking her head. You're still going back to his house, though? Jessica nodded. I left without him knowing, she admitted. Serafina's eyes widened. Oh my God, she bit her finger. Jess, you're really asking for trouble. Jessica let out a soft laugh. She slung her bag over her shoulder and made her way toward the exit. I'm not letting him take away my freedom, Serafina, she said simply. Marrying me against my will was already too much. Serafina's expression softened. Out another word, she pulled Jessica into a tight hug. Do you want me to drive you home? Jessica hesitated before shaking her head. No need, she said. But, can you call me a taxi? Of course, Serafina smiled. And stop apologizing, Bev, we're friends. Don't ever think you're troubling me. Minutes later, the taxi arrived, its headlights casting a soft glow against the pavement. Jessica took a deep breath, then stepped inside. The car pulled away, disappearing into the quiet city night. The Oliver mansion loomed ahead, dark and imposing. From the outside, it looked empty. Too empty. Jessica's heart pounded as she stood at the front door. She needed a moment, just a moment, to gather herself, before stepping inside. But before she could reach for the handle, the door swung open. She startled Edward. The butler stood there, his expression unreadable. His sharp eyes scanned her from head to toe before he finally spoke. "Madam," he said. A beat of silence. "Then, you're finally back." Edward's brows furrowed with concern. Jessica shifted uncomfortably under his gaze. "Sorry," she said, her voice calm but firm. "I had other matters to take care of." Edward remained silent for a moment, studying her with complicated emotions. She had changed into her usual formal attire, her appearance perfectly put together, as if she hadn't just been married today. If he hadn't known better, he might have believed nothing had happened at all. But Edward did know better. He might have believed nothing had happened at all. But Edward did know better. He knew Jessica hadn't wanted this marriage. And despite working for the Oliver family for years, despite his loyalty to his employer, he couldn't help but feel a pang of sympathy for her. After all, he had a daughter of his own. The thought of his little girl being forced into a marriage like this, trapped in a life she didn't choose, it unsettled him. Still, there was nothing he could do. "Please come inside, madam," he said at last. "I'll have Daisy prepare dinner for you." Jessica offered him a small, polite smile. "Thank you, Edward," she said as she stepped past him into the grand foyer. Then, after a pause, "Is William Oliver back?" Her voice was neutral, but there was a certain hesitation in her tone. Edward gave a slow nod. "Mr. Oliver returned about an hour ago." Jessica schooled her features into indifference, though internally she grimaced. Of course he was back. Not that she particularly cared. Without another word, she made her way upstairs to her bedroom. As she reached the door, a flicker of unease ran through her. Is he inside? But when she pushed the door open, she found the room empty. Relief flooded her chest. Of course, William probably had his own bedroom. It was ridiculous to think they'd be expected to share a bed. Shaking off the thought, she moved to freshen up. After a long shower, she plugged in her phone to charge. Then, turning to the massive walk-in closet, she found rows of elegant, high-end outfits neatly arranged inside. Silk blouses, tailored dresses, luxury loungewear. Everything exuded wealth and status. Jessica exhaled. How excessive. She picked something at random. Clothing was the least of her concerns right now. As she got dressed, she checked her phone. Several missed calls from an unknown foreign number stared back at her, her brows knit together. Who? Just as she was about to tap on the screen, the door swung open. Jessica jolted, her heart leaping into her throat. William stood at the threshold. His expression was unreadable, but his presence alone sent a sudden chill through the air. Before she could even question him, slam, the door shut behind him with force. Jessica instinctively stiffened as William strode toward her, his steps slow but deliberate. His cold, dark eyes locked onto hers. "Do you realize the mistake you made today?" His voice was dangerously low, laced with an edge that sent a shiver down her spine. Jessica sat motionless in front of the vanity mirror, gripping her phone a little tighter. She had expected him to be angry, but seeing him like this, so tense, so utterly furious, was still unsettling. Still, she refused to cower. Keeping her posture relaxed, she tilted her head slightly and met his gaze. "Mistake?" she echoed, feigning confusion. William's jaw tightened. "I told you to stay in the car," he ground out. "But what did you do instead?" Jessica let out a sharp laugh, mocking and unapologetic. "In the end, I left anyway, didn't I?" she said smoothly. "I'm sorry, dear Mr. Oliver, but I don't have the patience to sit around waiting in a parked car like some brainless fool." His eyes darkened. The room felt smaller. Without breaking eye contact, William pulled out his phone and placed it on the table between them. Jessica's gaze flickered downward, and there it was, a picture of her. Standing barefoot in the middle of the street, still in her wedding dress, alone exposed, Jessica's stomach twisted, but she kept her expression unreadable. William leaned in slightly, his voice dropping to a near growl. "Do you have any idea what your current status means, Jessica?" A muscle ticked in his jaw. His patience was razor-thin, and yet Jessica merely smirked, tilting her chin defiantly. Oh, she knew exactly what this meant, but the real question was, did he really expect her to care? Messy, barefoot part of her face was hidden beneath the sheer veil, but there was no mistaking the wedding dress, a spectacular wedding dress, one that anyone in the business community would recognize. Why, isn't that Mr. Oliver's bride's dress? Did she run away from the wedding? Speculation would spread like wildfire if that photo made its way online. Unless, of course, people believed William had ordered a cheap duplicate of his wife's gown. But no one would believe that. That wasn't William Oliver's style. The man was arrogant, meticulous, and exuded an air of untouchable wealth. Jessica watched the storm brewing in his eyes, taking no small amount of satisfaction in his anger, though she had to admit, it was a little terrifying too. Still, after everything he had put her through today, this felt well-deserved. And William's reputation? Not her problem. "Did you hear me?" His voice sharpened, demanding attention. Jessica inhaled deeply, forcing her heartbeat to steady. Then she smiled. "Slow, deliberate, Mr. Oliver," she said, voice as smooth as silk, "I have fulfilled my duty. I married you. That is enough. Whatever others may think, well, that's your concern, not mine." William's jaw tightened. "I forced you?" he hissed, his tone laced with something dangerously close to mockery. In a flash, he bent down and gripped her chin, his fingers firm, unyielding. Jessica gasped, her breath hitching as she found herself caught in his piercing gaze, cold, intense. "If you refuse to comply," William said, his voice dangerously low, "I will withdraw all funding for your father's treatment. No doctor will dare lay a hand on him." Rage ignited in Jessica's chest, her nails dug into her palms. "You bastard," she seethed in her mind. Immoral, cruel, heartless. She wanted to strike him, wipe that smug expression off his face, but she knew better. A single misstep and he could end her. One flick of his wrist and she'd be powerless. William studied her closely, his lips curling as he caught the fury blazing in her eyes, and beneath it the flicker of fear. He had won. Ever so slightly, glistening in the dim light, William's gaze dropped to them. William's gaze dropped to them. A sudden thought struck him. His lover's lips weren't nearly as enticing as these. Before he even realized it, his grip on her chin tightened. Jessica winced. "Let me go!" She pushed at his chest, struggling, but William's hold only grew firmer. "William Oliver," and then he pulled her forward. His lips crashed onto hers, a heated, forceful kiss. Jessica's breath caught, her entire body freezing in shock. She immediately clenched her teeth, refusing to let him deepen it. Her fists pounded against his chest, shoving, hitting, anything to get him off. "You bastard," she shouted, shoving him away with all her strength. William barely stumbled, but Jessica was already gone, bolting for the bathroom. Slam. The door locked behind her. For a long moment there was only silence. William exhaled slowly, his fingers brushing against his lips. Then his brows furrowed. Why? Did she look so offended? Did she expect him to apologize? For what? For marrying her? For claiming what was already his? A cold chuckle left his lips. How ridiculous! "Don't expect it," he muttered flatly. Then, without another glance, William grabbed his phone and strode toward the door. Slam! The violent sound echoed through the room. Jessica exhaled, her shoulders sagging slightly. At least he hadn't forced himself on her. The thought alone sent a shiver down her spine. She leaned against the bathroom door, pressing a hand to her chest, willing her heart to settle. A few moments passed before she cautiously stepped out. "Knock!" Jessica stiffened. "It's me, dear," came a soft voice from outside. "Aunt Daisy, dinner is ready." Jessica hesitated. She had no appetite, but refusing would seem rude, and she wasn't in the mood for unnecessary attention. "All right," she said, pulling open the door. Aunt Daisy offered her a small, warm smile and gestured for her to follow. They descended the grand circular staircase, the cool marble beneath her feet sending a slight chill up her spine. Jessica hadn't paid much attention to the mansion before, but now, as she walked through its vast corridors, she began to see it, the quiet opulence, the wealth woven into every intricate detail, mold-trimmed moldings, velvet curtains draped along the towering windows. Everything breathed extravagance, and when they finally stepped into the dining room, Jessica stopped in her tracks. The sheer size of the space overwhelmed her. The dining table stretched long and elegant, crafted from bone-white marble and topped with thick, gleaming glass. 10 high-backed chairs surrounded it, their polished wood gleaming under the soft glow of an enormous crystal chandelier. Jessica swallowed. Just how rich is this man? Old Edward was already waiting by the table. As soon as he saw her, he stepped forward and pulled out a chair. "Madam, please have a seat," he said with a respectful nod. Jessica hesitated before offering him a small, polite smile. "Thank you." Lowering herself onto the chair, she took in the absurd amount of food spread across the table. Every dish looked like something meant for a grand celebration. Lavish entrees, exquisite hors d'oeuvres, a bottle of fine red wine and a chilled champagne bottle stood in the center. Her brows furrowed. "Isn't this a bit much?" Jessica turned to Edward and Aunt Daisy, puzzled. Aunt Daisy let out a quiet sigh. "I'm sorry, madam. I thought tonight would be special, that there would be something to celebrate." Jessica's chest tightened. Of course, they would assume that, to them, this was a wedding night. A union to be honored, but this was no marriage, and there was nothing to celebrate. Jessica lowered her gaze. Aunt Daisy had meant well. "Where is he?" she asked, keeping her tone neutral. "Has William eaten?" Before either of them could respond, footsteps, steady, measured, and there he was. William entered the dining room, his expression unreadable, his movements as controlled as ever, but this time he wasn't alone. Another man followed him inside, similar in age but unfamiliar. Jessica's eyes narrowed slightly. Who was he? Edward, ever the dutiful butler, immediately pulled out a chair for William. Jessica stiffened. Sitting across from him again, her appetite vanished. Edward cleared his throat. "Sir, wine or champagne?" "Wine," William said, his voice clipped. Practiced ease. Edward poured a deep red liquid into his glass. Then, turning to Jessica, he hesitated before murmuring, "Apologies," and filled hers as well. Jessica barely glanced at it. William, on the other hand, lifted his glass and studied the swirling liquid, his brow furrowing ever so slightly. The chandelier above them bathed the room in a golden glow, yet somehow under his gaze, even that warmth seemed to dim. Silence pressed in. No one spoke. Not Edward, not Aunt Daisy, not the unfamiliar guest. It was as if William's very presence drained the air of any ease or conversation. Aunt Daisy was the only one who moved, carefully setting out plates, as if that simple act could break the tension. Jessica clenched her hands under the table. What kind of life had she stepped into? Jessica let out a quiet snort and picked up her fork. She wanted to finish this meal as quickly as possible and retreat to her bedroom. Away from him. At least there she wouldn't have to see William's face. Her fingers tightened around the silverware as she stabbed a piece of roast beef with a little more force than necessary. "Damn him," just as she brought the food to her lips. William spoke. "Bennett, give her the rules." Jessica paused. On the corner of her eye, she saw the unfamiliar man. Bennett reached into his briefcase. A moment later, he pulled out a thick black folder. With an easy, practiced smile, he placed it in front of her. "Madam," Bennett said smoothly. "Sorry, but you should read this." Jessica's eyes narrowed suspiciously. Her gaze flicked down to the folder. The title sent a sharp jolt of irritation through her. "Special Rules for Unwanted Marriage" by Mr. Oliver. Her grip on the fork tightened. Hell was hell. The room fell silent again, the tension thick as smoke. Jessica slowly set her fork down, her fingers brushing over the black leather cover. She didn't even need to read it to know what kind of nonsense William had written inside. Her head was already beginning to ache. Why is this man so insufferable? With an exasperated sigh, she flipped open the folder. On the first page, "The wife must be kind to the husband and the husband's family." Jessica let out a short, amused snort. She flipped to the second page. "The wife must act like a proper wife when appearing in public." Another snort. Her expression soured. On the third page, "The wife should not interfere in the husband's personal matters, and the husband will do the same." This time, she actually agreed. Perfect. That meant they wouldn't meddle in each other's lives. She turned the page. On the fourth page, "The wife should not travel alone at night." Jessica frowned. "No," she said immediately. She looked up, eyes flashing. "Why can't I travel at night?" William met her glare with an expression of pure indifference. "Unless you want to be kidnapped or harmed by my business rivals." He took a sip of his wine. "And if that happened, I wouldn't care." Jessica exhaled sharply through her nose. What kind of person is this man? For a second she wondered, was William involved in something illegal? A mafia boss? Wouldn't be surprising, that would explain why he had enemies who might kidnap her, but from what she knew, William's company was in real estate. Unless there was something darker lurking beneath the surface. She turned another page. On the 5th page, the wife must be ready to come whenever her husband needs her. Jessica's grip on the folder tightened. "What? On business?" she asked suspiciously. William didn't bother looking at her. He simply took another slow sip of wine, but Jessica knew what he was implying. Her jaw clenched. She flipped to the next page, practically glaring at the words. On the 6th page, the wife must have a style appropriate to her status as Mr. Oliver's wife. Jessica's brows furrowed. The 6th? She frowned. What does that even mean? William finally looked up, his gaze cool and unimpressed. Don't you understand? His voice was flat. Then he scoffed. Stupid. Jessica bristled, her teeth ground together in irritation. You expect me to dress like one of those over-glammed corporate wives? She demanded. William merely swirled his wine glass, utterly unbothered. Obviously, Jessica growled under her breath. Unbelievable. This man was completely out of his mind. William leaned back in his chair, his fingers tapping idly against the wine glass. I don't want people to think I've treated my wife badly, he said coolly. After all, it's all here. You're free to use your car, credit card, and whatever else you need. At his signal, Bennett stepped forward and placed a set of car keys and an exclusive-looking black card on the table. Jessica stared at the objects, her brow furrowing. A slow, cold grin curled on her lips. Interesting, it looked like she had just found a way to turn things to her advantage. She finally nodded. All right then, she turned the page. On the 7th rule, the wife is forbidden to work. Jessica's reaction was immediate. Impossible, she snapped. William arched an eyebrow, unfazed. Why not? Would you like it if I told you not to work? Jessica's glare burned into him. Of course you wouldn't. That's not fair, so I will keep working. William's gaze darkened slightly. And become what? An ordinary employee? He taunted. Jessica's jaw tightened. William let out a mocking chuckle. Unless you're a model, actress, or lawyer, I might consider allowing you to work. Jessica felt her blood boil. What a complete and utter bastard. She was so enraged that for a moment she actually imagined swallowing the man alive. Anyway, she said through gritted teeth, I'm keeping my job, cross this out. William's expression hardened. You only need to stay at home and enjoy the luxury around you. Is that really so difficult? Jessica let out a sharp laugh. And become your puppet? Don't dream. Without another word, she shot up from her chair. The thick black folder filled with its ridiculous rules went flying across the room. Her eyes turned icy as she met William's gaze. Don't act like you're some high king while I'm a lowly slave, she hissed. You're just a bastard who doesn't even know how to apologize. With that, she spun around and stormed out of the dining room. For a few moments, the room was silent. Bennett blinked, his face betraying a flicker of surprise and confusion. Then, hesitantly, he reached down, picked up the discarded folder, and glanced at William. The man was furious, his jaw clenched, his fists tightened. A low curse escaped his lips. Damn it. His grip on the wineglass tightened before he suddenly tilted his head back and drained the rest of his drink. Then his gaze snapped toward Bennett. Tell me, he said coldly, why is she so rebellious? Bennett exhaled slowly. She doesn't seem like a woman who can be bought with money or luxury, he said carefully. William's lips pressed into a thin line. He reached for his phone and dialed a number. I'd better go see Vivienne. Then, without another word, he pushed back his chair and strode out of the dining room. Bennett watched him go, then glanced at the untouched dishes on the table. He sighed, looking at the beautifully prepared meal with an almost affectionate gaze. Such a waste, he muttered. Such a damn waste. Jessica woke up sluggishly, her head still heavy from the restless night before. The first thing she noticed in the mirror was the dark circles under her eyes. She let out a groan. Last night had been hell, and it was all because of him, William Oliver. That man had single-handedly ruined her peaceful life. She checked the clock on the wall before finally sighing and heading to the bathroom. A while later, she emerged feeling somewhat refreshed, but her body still held the weight of exhaustion. Without thinking, she made her way downstairs. Her feet carried her to the kitchen. Old habits die hard. Aunt Daisy was busy preparing breakfast when Jessica walked into the kitchen. Her sudden arrival startled the older woman. For a brief moment, Aunt Daisy's hands froze over the countertop, her expression shifting from surprise to unease. "Madam? You're awake," Jessica smiled lightly. "Why do you look so worried?" Aunt Daisy hesitated, as if unsure how to respond. "Madam, you must have heard about her arrival. I know this may be difficult for you, but I hope you'll stay strong." Jessica frowned. Her? Confusion settled in. "Who's coming?" Aunt Daisy looked at Jessica in bewilderment. "You don't know?" Jessica's brow furrowed deeply. "A woman arrived late last night," Aunt Daisy continued carefully, "and she stayed here." For a moment, Jessica said nothing. Then, realization struck. Her lips curled into a mocking smile. William's lover? Was it the same woman in red? The one he met at the hotel yesterday? Jessica let out a quiet scoff. "Aunt Daisy, I didn't know about it," she admitted, her voice calm, almost indifferent. "And I don't care." She met Aunt Daisy's concerned gaze and added, "Don't worry about me." Aunt Daisy still looked uncertain. "Is that true?" she asked softly. "Are you really okay? You seemed to have trouble sleeping last night." Jessica nearly laughed. Did she think I lost sleep over William's mistress? As if she had only just found out about the woman's presence. Jessica simply shook her head. "I'm fine, Aunt Daisy," she said. "I just need to make breakfast and get ready for work." Work? Aunt Daisy's expression grew even more worried. She had overheard last night's argument at the dinner table. If William had already forbidden Jessica from working, wouldn't he be furious if she went against him? Jessica, however, remained unfazed. "My job isn't glamorous, nor does it make a lot of money," she admitted, reaching for the pancake batter in Aunt Daisy's hands. "But I enjoy it." Her voice was steady, resolute. "I never once considered leaving my job," Aunt Daisy exhaled slowly. A small smile tugged at the corners of her lips. "Madam, please sit down," she said gently. "Breakfast will be ready soon." But Jessica shook her head. "Let me finish it," she insisted. "You can prepare something else, for William maybe, or for his guest." Aunt Daisy's face fell slightly. She shifted uncomfortably, but didn't argue. In the end, she stepped aside and let Jessica finish making the pancakes. Once the last of the batter was gone, Jessica plated her breakfast and sat down to eat. William was still nowhere in sight. She could only assume he was preoccupied elsewhere, but it didn't matter to her. Not one bit. After finishing her meal, Jessica returned to her room. A few moments later, she stepped out again, dressed in a sleek black blazer. The sound of her heels echoed through the vast, empty mansion. As she walked, a maid suddenly approached her. "Madam," the maid said hesitantly, "is this yours?" Jessica turned to see a set of car keys and a black card in the woman's hand. They had been placed on a small cupboard right outside her bedroom door. The same car keys and credit card William had given her last night. Jessica's eyes narrowed slightly. How did they get here? For a moment, she hesitated. Then, with a faint smirk, she reached out and took them. "Thank you," she said, and without another word, she walked away. At that moment, a faint laugh drifted from a distance, accompanied by the rhythmic click of approaching footsteps. Jessica instinctively turned her head, one brow arching in mild curiosity. Then, her gaze landed on two shadows stretching across the marble floor. William and a stunning woman with long, cascading hair. There she is, William's secret lover. A sarcastic, lilting voice cut through the air. "Oh? Isn't that your wife? The one who was caught wandering around in her wedding dress like a lost soul?" The woman's words were sharp, deliberately mocking. Jessica clenched her jaw slightly but refused to rise to the bait. Not worth my energy. Out of words, she narrowed her eyes and turned to walk away, but she barely took 2 steps before the woman called out again. "Wait a minute." Jessica exhaled, her patience thinning. The woman sauntered over, her manicured fingers still clasped around William's hand. "Miss Holmes, why are you in such a hurry?" Jessica stilled but didn't turn around. Her voice remained cool, detached. "Apologies, but I have far more important things to do." The woman gasped in feigned shock. "Oh, William, look at how your wife talks to me. She won't even spare me a glance," she pouted dramatically, leaning into William's side like a spoiled child. William, without hesitation, pressed a brief kiss to her lips before stepping toward Jessica. "Where do you think you're going?" he asked, his tone unreadable. Jessica's eyes remained indifferent. "Unfortunately for you, it's a working day," she replied flatly. "I have a job to get to." She was about to continue on her way when suddenly William's grip clamped around her wrist. Her head snapped up, her glare fierce. "Let go of me!" William's expression darkened. "Didn't I warn you last night?" His voice was dangerously low. "Stay here." Jessica met his glare head-on. "I don't want to." Then, for the first time, she turned her full attention to the woman beside him. The moment Jessica took a closer look, realization struck. Vivienne Hale, an international supermodel. Her face adorned countless magazine covers, a woman far more powerful and high-profile than Jessica herself. Of course, no wonder she looked familiar. Jessica's lips curled into a faint, unreadable smile. "I must say, Miss Hale, I didn't expect to see you here," she said smoothly. "But don't worry, I can turn a blind eye to whatever's going on. You two can have all the fun you want. I won't make a big deal out of it." Vivienne laughed at that. A slow, deliberate chuckle. Then she stepped closer, brushing a hand over Jessica's shoulder as she whispered in her ear, her voice like silk laced with venom. "Even if you did take issue with my relationship with William, what could you possibly do about it?" Jessica held her ground. Unfazed, Vivienne's lips curled into a smirk. "Let me give you some advice. Know your place, Jessica," she said sweetly. "Or else?" Jessica arched a brow. "Or else what?" Vivienne only smiled knowingly. "You'll find out soon enough." Jessica's fingers twitched slightly, but she forced herself to stay calm. "I never wanted to be in this mess to begin with. If William and Vivienne truly loved each other, why hadn't they gotten married instead? Why had she, a complete outsider, been dragged into this?" Vivienne turned back to William, her expression suddenly soft and pouty. "Honey, next time, I don't want to see her," she whined, as if Jessica were nothing more than an unsightly stain on her perfect life. Then, without hesitation, she pulled William in for a deep, lingering kiss, right in front of Jessica. Jessica clenched her teeth. William didn't pull away. Instead, his hand slid around Vivienne's waist, holding her close. "I know she's annoying," he murmured against Vivienne's lips, "but forget about her for now. Don't you have a photo shoot scheduled today?" With that, he took Vivienne's hand and led her down the grand staircase, sparing Jessica one last cold glance before disappearing from sight. Jessica rolled her eyes. Of course. Turns out Vivienne wasn't just a model. She was insufferable. She waited not long. Just enough time for the distant hum of an engine to fade, for the telltale sound of Vivienne's car to finally disappear down the long driveway. Only then did Jessica descend the stairs. She had no desire to see Vivienne again, but the moment she stepped into the foyer, William was already there. Before she could react, he seized her wrist and dragged her forward, pushing her hard against the cold wall. His grip was firm as he clasped her chin between his fingers, tilting her face up toward his. "Can you be a dutiful and obedient wife?" he demanded, his voice low and sharp. Jessica's eyes burned with defiance. "No." Her response was instant, her voice edged with steel. William's jaw tightened. "Never appear in front of Vivienne again," he warned. Jessica let out a dry, humorless laugh. "You think I want to see her again?" she snapped, shoving him back with force. William stumbled slightly, more from surprise than from the strength of her push. "I have to go, or I'll be late." But before she could take another step, his voice cut through the air. "If you had a career like Vivienne's, I wouldn't stop you," he said coldly. Jessica froze, her fingers curled into fists. "Not this again." She turned, eyes flashing. "But you," she hissed, her tone laced with contempt. "Stop belittling my work, Mr. Oliver. Didn't you build your fortune simply by inheriting your father's wealth? How great does that make you? If you weren't born into the Oliver family, do you really think you'd be who you are now?" Silence. Jessica's words struck their mark. William's entire body tensed, his nostrils flared, his teeth grinding together. No one had ever dared to speak to him like that before. His fingers twitched at his sides, a muscle jumping in his jaw. "If you don't know anything about me," he said through gritted teeth, "then you'd do well to shut up." Jessica tilted her chin up, unshaken. "Well," she said smoothly, "I'm quiet now. Let me go." Her gaze locked onto his, unwavering, bold, unafraid. Dressed in her sleek black blazer, her presence felt sharp and commanding, like a force that refused to be ignored. William clenched his fists. For a moment, he shut his eyes, inhaling deeply, forcing himself to rein in his temper. Then he exhaled and opened his palm. "Give me the car keys," he ordered, his voice colder than ever. Jessica arched a brow. "Didn't you give them to me?" Her tone was laced with mockery. Would an Oliver actually go back on his word? She saw the flicker of irritation cross his face. Good, she refused to be bullied. She refused to be the weak, submissive wife he wanted. William's fingers flexed as he fought to control himself. He wouldn't resort to violence. Not against Jessica, at least. Not yet. Instead, he snatched the keys from her hand and strode toward the door. "I'll take you," he said flatly. Jessica blinked. She stood frozen, watching his retreating back with narrowed eyes. What? He wanted to drive her? Suspicion prickled at the back of her mind. What exactly was he planning? Before she could dwell on it further, his irritated voice rang out from outside. "Hurry up, or have you changed your mind about going?" Jessica let out a sharp breath before finally following. Within moments they were in the car. William looked every bit as careless as ever, his plain white shirt slightly rumpled, his shorts barely proper for the early morning chill. Yet, his grip on the wheel was firm, his posture rigid. He pressed the gas pedal, hard the car shot forward. "Where's the cafe?" he asked, eyes on the road. Jessica studied him carefully. "What do you want?" William scoffed. "What do you think? Do you expect me to shut it down by force?" Jessica huffed out a bitter laugh. "You must be cursed by a demon from hell." She reached for the door handle. "Put me." Before she could finish, William suddenly accelerated. The engine roared as the car sped past the permitted limit. Jessica's heart jumped. Her fingers clenched into the seat. "William, you're making me mad." Her voice shook slightly, but she masked it with anger. William's hands tightened around the wheel. "You make me mad, Jessica," he muttered, his voice ice cold, and for the first time she wondered, just how far was William willing to go? William glanced to the side. Jessica's face was pale, her fingers digging into the car seat, her breathing erratic. Terror. It looked good on her. Satisfaction curled inside him. Where was that bold woman now, the one who had challenged him just minutes ago? He smirked. Let's see how much she could handle. His foot pressed harder against the gas pedal. The speedometer climbed, a clear violation of traffic laws. But he didn't care. All he wanted was to make Jessica regret her words. Who did she think she was to speak to him like that? The wind roared against the car windows. The tires screeched slightly against the road, and Jessica's breath came out in short, panicked gasps. "William, for God's sake, I still want to live," she screamed, clutching the seatbelt as if it were a lifeline. William scoffed. "You think I want to die?" Jessica's eyes darted to the road ahead. We could get caught." The words barely left her lips when the unmistakable sound of sirens blared behind them. Jessica twisted in her seat. Red and blue lights flashed in the rearview mirror. Her heart dropped. A police car. They were being chased. "Oh no! No, 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 William!" she cried. "They're behind us." William exhaled sharply, glancing at the mirror with an unimpressed look. Then, with an exaggerated sigh, he finally pulled the car over to the side of the road. Moments later, there was a sharp knock on the window. William rolled it down lazily. "Excuse me, sir," the officer said firmly. "You were exceeding the speed limit. May I see your driver's license?" Silence. William just stared at him. Then, with complete nonchalance, he said, "I don't have it with me." Jessica's jaw dropped. "What?" She whipped her head toward him, eyes wide in disbelief. "You forgot something that important?" she hissed. William let out a low chuckle, completely unbothered. "You think I care about that when we're in the middle of an argument?" Jessica groaned, pressing her temples. "But you shouldn't," she cut herself off with a frustrated growl. Her patience had completely run out. Without another word, she reached into her bag, pulled out her own driver's license, and handed it to the officer. "I'm sorry, officer," she said through clenched teeth. "He forgot his, but I have mine." The officer inspected it for a moment, then sighed. "Unfortunately, this won't save you from sanctions and fines," he said. "Please follow us to the station." Jessica turned toward William, her gaze lethal. "This is all your fault." And yet, the man had the audacity to shrug, completely unbothered. Jessica's fingers twitched. She wanted to punch him. Instead, she gritted her teeth and climbed back into the car. Meanwhile, William leaned back, a slow smirk forming on his lips. Arrested for speeding? This was almost amusing. Let's go see what the police station here looks like, he mused. Jessica snapped. You damn, I have work. I'm not playing criminal tourism with you. Her voice trembled with rage, but William only chuckled as he started the engine. The ride to the station was silent. Jessica refused to speak, her arms crossed tightly over her chest, her mood an absolute storm. When they arrived, she was just about to get out, but William suddenly reached toward her. Her muscles tensed. What? She demanded. He held out his hand. Give me your phone, he said flatly. Jessica narrowed her eyes. What for? William let out a short snort. You'll find out. Suspicion flared in her chest. She hesitated, but after a long moment of glaring at him, she finally shoved the phone into his hand. But don't open what you shouldn't open, she warned. William only sent her a sarcastic glance before stepping out of the car. A few feet away, he dialed a number, his face unreadable as he spoke into the phone. Jessica approached him just as he ended the call. She crossed her arms. Who did you just call? William slipped her phone back into her hand without sparing her a glance. Someone useful, he replied coolly. And with that, he walked toward the station, leaving Jessica to fume behind him. William's words stung. As if she were completely useless, Jessica's irritation flared. Aren't you the one who caused this mess? She muttered under her breath. And now you need someone else to clean it up? You're just as useless as I am. She clenched her fists, swallowing the rest of her frustration. Not that William would notice or care. He strode ahead, his steps unhurried, exuding an air of confidence that grated on her nerves. Jessica had no choice but to follow. 2 police officers approached. Sir, ma'am, please come with us, one of them said, his voice firm but neutral. William nodded. Jessica, on the other hand, hesitated. She had never dealt with the police before. Her stomach twisted uncomfortably. How are you going to handle this? She whispered, unable to contain her worry. William barely spared her a glance. No answer. Jessica's irritation spiked. William, you really… Shut up. His voice was a low, mocking whisper. A trivial matter like this won't land you in jail. Jessica's jaw clenched. Arrogant bastard. Her fingers twitched with the urge to smack the smug look off his face. The only thing stopping her was the presence of the officers. Seriously, was this guy only good for impressing his girlfriend? The station's interior was sleek and modern, the walls dominated by glass. Jessica's gaze trailed along the open office spaces, where officers worked diligently at their desks. She barely had time to take in her surroundings when a man came striding toward them. Bennett, the person William had called earlier. The man greeted William with an easy, knowing smile before offering a polite nod to everyone else. Jessica watched the interaction with curiosity. You wait here, William told her, his tone leaving no room for argument. She sighed. Okay. With that, William, Bennett, and the officers disappeared into a closed office. Jessica dropped onto a waiting chair, tapping her fingers against her thigh impatiently. 15 minutes. That's how long she waited before the door finally swung open. William emerged first, his expression as indifferent as ever. Bennett followed, his demeanor far more relaxed, his warm smile never fading. Ma'am, you're free to continue your journey, Bennett informed her smoothly. Jessica narrowed her eyes. Just like that? She asked, skeptical. What exactly were you guys talking about in there? You don't look the least bit concerned. Bennett parted his lips to answer, but William snorted before he could get a word out. Who the hell would dare make things difficult for me? He muttered, looking away, exuding even more arrogance than before. Jessica scowled. Oh, for God's sake, does he ever stop being so unbearably full of himself? Fine, if everything's settled, give me the car keys, she said, holding out her palm. I'd rather drive myself. You can go home with Bennett. William didn't even acknowledge her demand. Instead, he turned on his heel and walked toward the exit with her car keys. Jessica sucked in a sharp breath. That meant only one thing. He still intended to drive her all the way to the cafe. She exhaled slowly. It's okay, ma'am. Bennett. She cut him off, turning to him with a pointed look. Why don't you be William? She mused. At least you're friendlier than that boar-faced guy. Bennett chuckled. You must be joking, he said, amusement dancing in his eyes. He'd kill me if he heard that. Jessica merely smiled, offering no further comment. In the end, she climbed back into the car with William behind the wheel driving for her. Again, this time William's driving wasn't as reckless as before. When they arrived at the cafe, Jessica didn't step out right away. She sat still, eyes fixed on the windshield, lost in thought. Then, without looking at him, she spoke. "Maybe I'll come home in the evening. You don't have to pick me up." William didn't reply immediately. Instead, he reached into his pocket and handed back the phone he had kept all day. Then, without another word, he stepped out of the car. Jessica watched him go, exhaling softly. But before she could enter the cafe, his voice cut through the evening air. "What time will you be home?" She turned back, meeting his gaze with an unreadable expression. "I don't know," she said flatly. William let out a cold snort and rolled up the car window. A moment later, the sleek vehicle sped off into the distance. Later, that night, Jessica had just closed her laptop when Serafina rushed over, looking flustered. "You should head home, Bev," she urged. Jessica frowned. "Why the rush? That man is waiting for you." Jessica's suspicion flared. "Who?" Serafina gave her a pointed look. "Your husband, Mr. Oliver." Jessica blinked. "William?" Her grip on her bag tightened. "I don't get it. How did he even know to come here? Did you ask him?" Serafina scoffed. "No way. I actually told him not to wait for you." Jessica let out an exasperated sigh, hurriedly gathering her things. She muttered under her breath, "Unbelievable. Are you sure it was him?" Serafina rolled her eyes. "He came in person, Jessica. I saw him." "Hmm?" Jessica eyed her suspiciously. "And what did he say? He didn't do anything weird, did he?" Serafina's brow furrowed. "Of course not. What do you think he'd do to me?" she said dryly. Jessica scanned her up and down, as if checking for signs of distress. Serafina huffed. "Relax. He didn't touch me. But I won't lie, he's intimidating. He barely spoke, but his presence alone made me uncomfortable. The man is scary." Jessica nodded. "That's William for you," she muttered. Then, adjusting her bag strap, she sighed. "All right, I'll go see him." At the cafe. By now, the cafe had been closed for half an hour. The place was empty, silent, except for him. William sat alone at one of the tables, staring into a cup of untouched coffee. His white shirt was slightly unbuttoned at the collar, the sleeves neatly rolled up to his elbows. His black suit jacket was draped over the chair beside him. His dark hair was a little disheveled. And though his expression remained unreadable, Jessica could detect the faint traces of exhaustion on his face. Did he come straight from work? Not that it made a difference. He was still as annoyingly composed and ridiculously good-looking as ever. Jessica pushed aside the thought and approached him. Ruth, she was close enough to be sure no employees were eavesdropping. She crossed her arms and asked, "Didn't I tell you not to pick me up?" William barely reacted. "If you don't want to come home with me, that's fine too," he said lazily, as if it didn't matter. Jessica pressed her lips together in a pout. If he had already bothered coming all the way here, she might as well take the ride home. No point in wasting money on a taxi. "Are you leaving now?" he asked. His coffee cup was still full, suggesting he wasn't in a hurry. "Yes and no," Jessica muttered. Without another word, William stood up, grabbed his suit jacket and walked off, completely ignoring her. Jessica blinked. "Huh." She frowned at his retreating back, utterly baffled. Then, under her breath, she grumbled, "Seriously? Arbitrary, selfish, intimidating, sarcastic. What other flaws does this man have?" she muttered under her breath as she followed him outside. The night air was crisp, and the streets were quiet as they made their way to the car. Roos inside, Jessica expected William to start the engine immediately, but he didn't. Instead, he turned slightly, his sharp gaze settling on her. "Get ready," he said, his voice calm but firm. "I need to meet someone after this." Jessica scoffed. "Let me guess, your girlfriend?" she quipped. "In that case, I'd rather go home alone." She reached for the door handle, prepared to step out, but before she could, William's hand shot out, gripping hers firmly. Jessica froze. His hold wasn't forceful, but it was enough to make her pause. When she looked up, she was met with an expression far more serious than she expected. "No," he said, his voice lower this time. "He's someone who's been spreading false rumors about me." Jessica frowned. "Wait, so I'm about to be dragged into some kind of confrontation? Would he really take her to meet his enemies?" And that's where things get interesting. William isn't just here to pick Jessica up. He's dragging her into something much bigger. Who is this mysterious person spreading false rumors? And why does William want Jessica there? This story is far from over. In the next episode, tensions rise, secrets unfold, and Jessica might just learn more about William than she ever expected. So, what do you think? Is William protecting Jessica, or is she just a pawn in his game? Let me know in the comments. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss what happens next.